Welcome to Lunch Hour Legal Marketing. This is Conrad Somm from Mockingbird, and I have a tractor that's almost as small as a lawnmower and a lawnmower that's kind of a small tractor. My brother makes fun of me. He calls my tractor a lawnmower, and it kind of annoys me.
And I'm Gyi from Attorney Sync, and I just celebrated my birthday, which I share with Edgar Allan Poe.
All right, well, happy birthday. I do note that I left you a message on your voicemail, and you didn't mention it when we were doing the pre-show.
It's a very kind, thoughtful message that I've intended to thank you for. Really appreciate that.
Passive-aggressive shaming brought to you from Lunch Hour Legal Marketing.
Well, we were so busy talking about all this other exciting news that I didn't want to break your flow. Speaking of exciting news.
Yeah, the Lunch Hour Legal Marketing podcast would like to congratulate Seth Price for the acquisition of Blue Shark, his digital marketing agency. If you've ever been at a conference, I guarantee you've shaken the hand of Seth Price. They were purchased by the same crew, Herringbone, that purchased Jason Hennessy Digital, and Mickey Love's firm. So congratulations. That is a triumvirate. Thank you. Bungling my words here.
Yes.
Powerhouse of digital marketing in the legal world. So congratulations.
Yes. And we don't just talk about acquisitions. What else do we talk about here on Lunch Hour Legal Marketing?
So we'll go over the news, and then we're going to talk about the plight of the smaller firm in the sea of reviews, and going on later to talk again with data and share some data about why we hate Google's Performance Max campaigns.
Make the world go round.
Money makes the world go round.
Welcome to Lunch Hour Legal Marketing, teaching you how to promote, market, and make fat stacks for your legal practice. Here on Legal Talk Network.
All right, everybody, welcome to Lunch Hour Legal Marketing. As always, we start with the news. All right, Gyi, we almost always start the news with yet another announcement about the monetization of the digital world. What's going on with advertising?
So OpenAI has announced that it's an announcement for an announcement of a coming announcement. That
and they're excited about that exciting news.
They're very excited. Their ChatGPT is not launching ads yet, but they do plan on starting testing ads in the coming weeks. I have heard people that have gained access to early versions of it. I mean, I think so what does this mean for law firms? One, add the potential to advertise into ChatGPT into your mix. I don't necessarily think that I wouldn't want to be the guinea pig for this ad platform rollout of theirs, but hey, for different strokes for different folks. And two, I think that it's an interesting observation on the 360, or I guess not 360, a 180. 360 would be back to where they started. But a 180 on their position on ads. You know, they had come out very strongly, like ads was like their worst case scenario. And here we are doing ads.
All right. Also in the news, you were recently featured on a podcast. You want to share that so we can drive people to some more? Actually, this is really good data on this. What podcast were you on? Let's talk about it.
I was on Near Media's The Near Memo podcast with Greg Sterling and Mike Blumenthal. And as we're going to talk about, one of the things that has been kind of on everybody's mind is what's going on with local. Can we compete in local? What might local SEO look like in the AI mode world? And so we'll drop a link to that, but a conversation that we're going to expand upon here on Lunch Hour Legal Marketing.
And if you're watching us on YouTube, please smash that like button, subscribe. You want to hear more of us all of the time. Leave a comment. We love to answer those questions that show up in the comments. And another episode you might like is our most recent Conrad's Crystal Ball episode, in which Gyi and I score ourselves on our ability to prognosticate what happened in 2025, and we tell you with a high level of certainty what's going to happen this year.
Very exciting. We wanted to first say thank you so much to Al Ludwig for listening to Lunch Hour Legal Marketing. And he actually wrote a post on his, and he had some really insightful things to say. We'll drop a link to that. And we kind of wanted to pick up on some of his reactions and give some follow-up thoughts on some of these topics. So the first thing that he pointed out from the Crystal Ball, so if you haven't listened to the Crystal Ball episode, maybe you go listen to that. You can pause here and go listen to that first. But he mentions, I'm just going to quote from the post, the first quote about PE-backed law firms, I think that some segment of the consumers is going to choose to work with the local provider. I don't know if that was my sentiment. I might have mentioned that as a way to position. Al suggests that while he gets the logic, he doesn't agree that there's a major factor for the average consumer. And so the thinking here is that, most people, they're not thinking about the business structure, the ownership structure, whether they're using an MSO, whether it's PE backed. A lot of people, they drive by a billboard. It's the same billboard they see every day, whether it's a national, the national players are banking on this, private equity's banking on this. And I agree. I think largely you're not going to, on a consumer by consumer basis, you're not going to get into the business entity structure and who owns whom. But Conrad, what would you say to someone that is in a market that has national players coming, that has private equity advertising dollars? Is your recommendation go compete with those ad dollars?
No. And most of you can't, right? And so my read on this is the sentiment he's expressing is really because law firms have done an abysmal job of being local. Of advertising advertising their localness as opposed to advertising locally, but really pushing that I'm about this city or this state or whatever that may be. There is a limit that we haven't really seen people do this. We always talk about the same examples, Gyi. It's kind of tiresome. Like, I don't want to say his name. I'm not going to say, who I'm thinking about, because we use that as an example over and over again. There's such an opportunity to differentiate yourself from billboards by being deeply, genuinely connected to your community. And I want to be really clear. We talk about this in some fashion many times. It doesn't just have to be the local. It doesn't have to be Cincinnati. I'm the Cincinnati guy, right? It can be this part of Cincinnati, right? Like, so you're not, again, we talk about boiling the ocean, but like most of you are not trying to appeal to a demographic in any way. Local is one of those ways to do that, but like there can be a demographic within local. There can be a group within local. There can be a area within local, but there's a short part of local, right? That's to me what's really missing is trying to compete with the big players on their own terms. And that is a recipe for failure.
Yeah, and as Al notes in his post as well, he says, most people call the first name that comes to mind, so I definitely agree with you, the note about the importance of building brand, go with the referral or submit a few forms and talk to whoever responds first. Ownership structure rarely enters the chat. And I think that's a really good point, right? But in speaking to the firms, while you're not trying to position on ownership structure, you are trying to position against firms that aren't in the local community. And do we have evidence that this is at least, there's a hypothesis that this matters? The answer is yes. And how do we know this? Because national firms like Morgan & Morgan put up billboards that say things like, "We are Michigan," with the Michigan football team. And so we know that and our research with Near Media also supports this. And I think there's other research out there that you can find. Proximity, at least to some segment of the market, proximity does matter. And so people choosing local is a thing. But to Conrad's point, I think there's a lot of opportunity for improvement. And again, it's not about being like, hey, we're going to run ads on, don't go with the PE-backed firm. Instead, though, we are saying that is a point of differentiation that a lot of law firms aren't taking enough advantage of in terms of local context. Right.
And even the satellite office problem or opportunity, depending on which side of the coin you're sitting, That's certainly the proximity thing is certainly something that big firms can play, right? And you're seeing this over and over again. We talk about it, we call it the centipede strategy, but like it is easy enough to create that satellite office and have that perspective of proximity. And you're right, Gyi. John Morgan, the billboard that says what is it? We are Michigan. They know that this works. I mean, the irony. It's ironic to like 25 people in the world who work in digital marketing for the legal industry. Everyone else, it's just like, oh, that must be a law firm that's in Michigan, right?
Right.
And so like the dripping irony of that billboard, and it's not just Michigan. You guys have seen the localness of John Morgan everywhere. It resonates. You know this resonates. And also, by the way, those guys research and spend a ton of money on market research and like piggyback on that to prove the point that localness really, really matters.
Absolutely. Second point Al pulls out, there's a quote that, I don't know which one of us said it, but the reviews get so, I think we posed the question of like, what is going to be pressure on Google to do anything about reviews or really anybody else? Because we know that no one's enforcing anything. So do the reviews get so ridiculous that nobody ever uses the reviews anymore because they're so bad? And he says, I don't think that that's going to happen anyway. We're so trained on reviews. And I think he's right. I don't think that we're going to, that Google's going to let reviews get to a point that people aren't using them. And, to Al's point, consumers aren't really doing anything to vet reviews or looking any deeper. I think there's some around the edges. I think people are becoming more suspicious and skeptical of the internet in general and reviews being a part of that. But largely, I think Al's right. Everybody's so trained on these reviews. However, even taking out the ridiculousness of how fake they are and all that kind of stuff, we know reviews matter. Again, Near Media Research teases this out. We also know that in most competitive environments, the expectations on review counts and sentiment are absurdly high. So what do you tell a firm that is trying to compete in this landscape? And frankly, even if they're doing all, let's just do the basic, because we've talked about this a million times. So let's talk about the things, first of all. Let's assume they're already doing this. Let's assume they've already invested in delivering better experiences from a service standpoint. They've already invested in systems to maximize getting happy clients to sing their praises. They've already invested in getting creative around finding other ways to get reviewed, whether it's the intake experience, whether it's speaking, whether it's focus groups, whether it's all these other things that people are having experience with the firm. So they're getting reviews from that. Let's assume they're doing all those things. And there's still a huge gulf between where they are and where their competitors are. What do we say to those firms?
Well, let me piggyback on the market research on this. We know that people do not believe the reviews. We also know that they rely on the reviews. Those two things are the same thing. It's the same people. The same exact people will tell you. And this is not just like me giving anecdotal crap. This is out of Near Media's research, right? So we know this is the case.
Watch people do searches and look and talk about it.
And they know it's fake and they don't care. So this is like the very stupid, irrational human behavior. Okay. But that is a fact. And Gyi and I are not going to be able to change that. Neither are you, dear law firm. I hate to break that to you. So just accept where people are operating. So I always look at reviews as an asset. Every law firm from a marketing perspective has a series of assets and liabilities. And reviews are an asset. And your ability to generate reviews on a regular cadence and the volume of positive reviews that you can generate on a regular cadence, that is an intrinsic asset to the law firm. Or if you can't do that, it is a liability. So the question comes that Gyi's posing, you can't compete with all of the fake reviews in your location. What does one do? And I have two long-winded answers to that, which I will try and
Well, that's what we're here for, Conrad. Your long-winded answers.
Thank God it's the podcast, right? But I'll try and make them quippy. The first is, and Gyi and I talk about this all the time, the absolute importance of omnichannel marketing. So if you are reliant on a single channel, that is especially today, that is a very, very dangerous I will say, stupid place to live. And I feel most agencies focus on a marketing channel, right? Whatever that may be. Like, I grew up as an SEO, so we're going to be an SEO company, or an advertiser. I mean, we're an advertising company. And then they kind of maybe cross-sell some stuff, but most agencies are kind of singularly focused. It's why you don't really talk to agencies about the importance of referral marketing, because they can't play in that game. You need to be thinking about all of the channels: digital, offline, social engagement, local engagement, right? Your brand, all of these things need to start playing together, because as one thing gets hurt, the other things can take over. Basic portfolio theory applied to your marketing. So that's really, really important. The other thing I'll give you, Gyi, as a strategy for an asset that may not be able to compete. You have a JV review volume asset, and you're playing in the big leagues because you're in downtown Chicago, or because you are in a super hyper-saturated market. Move. Get another office.
Right.
Get an office where you can
So
win. Don't let those reviews that you've worked so hard to get never return for you. Go put them somewhere where they will return. That is, and it's stupid that this is how, like, the game that we're playing, but don't hate the player, hate the game.
Yeah. So changing location, that is a tactical recommendation that you might decide to deploy, thinking, hey, look, I can't compete with reviews here, but I can compete with reviews elsewhere. So that is an option. My view, and this is what the conversation on Near Media was, so go check that conversation out, but I want to expand on that. And you allude to this idea of omnichannel, but I think it's important to really bear out the meaning of this, of like what we're trying to say. So, we say omnichannel and we say diversification, but let's talk about what's potentially out to start with. LSAs, you got to have reviews, right?
So, yeah. So again, this is, so I think you need to think, so yes, LSAs, but you need to look at this in terms of, I don't want to make a categorical comment on that.
Yeah, of course. No, of course. But I think it's important to understand the context of, like, see, I think the thing that's missed is, I'm not saying not to do I'm a huge LSA person. If the LSAs work from an economic standpoint, go do the LSAs. My point, though, is that don't be surprised that your LSA channel doesn't perform like it's going to perform for those that have thousands of reviews, especially in the non-brand, right? So we're going to assume, for the sake of this argument, you don't have direct business lookup on. So these aren't people that are coming to you because they know your brand. They don't know you.
Hey,
so
Gyi, what's direct business lookup in LSAs? Just so our listeners know what we're talking about.
Don't we have a whole episode on that? So
we do. I just don't want to send them elsewhere.
They can go back and listen to.
For you non-loyal listeners for whom Gyi is speaking over, direct business search is Google quietly turned on branded queries for local service ads. So they will trigger for your brand. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I wanted to make sure that people.
No, I think this is important though, is because again, I'm not. Don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying just turn on these off, and I'm not saying stop investing at all in these channels that require reviews. I'm saying that you need to rethink your resource deployment and your expectations about business development in the context of you don't have reviews, and so. Is LSAs likely to be a lead driver for new business and non-brand if you don't have a competitive number of reviews? And the answer is it's not going to be as effective as it would be if you had the reviews. We'll leave it at that. Local SEO, non-brand, direct response. Someone that doesn't know a car accident lawyer, they search car accident lawyer near me or divorce lawyer near me. If you don't have a competitive number of reviews, you might still get some clients, but you're at a big competitive disadvantage. And so what I was trying to say is that not to do zero, because we know in the context of, regardless of how somebody hears about you, they're going to go look you up online and they expect to see happy clients singing your praises. But the number doesn't matter in the same way, right? Because they're not vetting when someone gets your name and they search your firm and they see that you've got 100 happy clients singing your praises. They're not comparing you to 1,100 reviews from your competitor. It's only in that non-brand context when they don't know you that the reviews really become that straight up comparison. And so my point is that from a resource deployment standpoint, you should be recalibrating where you're spending money and time and investment in your marketing to channels that reviews are not the deal breaker that they can be, or the as impactful as they are in lower funnel non-brand search. And so
Question
what
for
are
you.
those channels? Yeah, go ahead.
On the LSAs, my gut is like, because they are so powerful, and as we know, the volume of business that goes through that is so high. If you throw out local search as a channel,
I'm not saying throw it out.
No, I think you are. You're saying if you can't compete, don't play the game, and I don't disagree with that.
I think, again, so just to qualify, I think you have to play the game a little bit, because I do think that, forget about it, take LSAs away for a second. In local pack, when people search your name, they expect to see reviews, period.
Fine.
The difference
different
is that the number doesn't matter. The number doesn't matter as much, because they're just vetting. They just want to see, like, oh, you're in business. People are happy with you. You're providing good service. It's a validation that you're a real going concern, I think, to a lot of people. Where if you have zero GBP presence and you have no reviews, people are like, it's a brand new law firm.
I don't disagree at all. I don't disagree.
And so
with that
again, my point is so we get through all that. The purpose of this conversation was really to say, okay, and I think we can even be stronger about it the way you said it. Like, I'm not going to play the game. I'm not going to play the non-brand lower funnel local search capture game to the same extent that I've played historically. What should I do instead? And so then you start take your list of all your different channels. Which channels can you put messaging out on that don't have reviews baked in the same way that search does? And so you already mentioned a couple of them. I think this omni-channel brand building in local, not in local search, but in the local community. I think the local micro influencer strategy. I think targeted paid social. You could talk about, if you've got the budget for it, you can talk about traditional offline vehicles, because again, you don't need to have the reviews don't play the same role,
or traditional online vehicles. Like, you can run pay-per-click, right?
You can. Again, just like knowing what's currently going on in pay-per-click, you'd want, my suggestion would be that you are targeting queries that do not trigger LSAs.
You're targeting queries that do not trigger LSAs.
Because we know the research shows that when LSAs are on the page, the LSAs command the lion's share.
Sure,
so
but, but you're not incurring costs.
You might not be incurring costs, but you might be paying more of a premium because, I'm saying you might be paying a premium on your clicks because your click-through rate is going to be a lot lower for CPCs in those SERPs, because people are choosing. So you're running up impressions without clicks.
I get it. Do you have a methodology for identifying keywords that don't trigger LSAs?
No, I mean, okay. Not anything consistent, but I think that strategically, and I think the other thing that supports this strategy is that I think it's very likely in AI mode world, in generative world, in ChatGPT ads world, the queries stop becoming the thing, because the consumer journey is not, it's not car accident lawyer near me anymore. It's show me the highest rated car. And this is a problem, because see, again, highest rated is going to trigger the ad platforms to think reviews. But let's try to think of it different. Let's talk about what the near media research says. Legal services consumers in the PI context are very likely to use ChatGPT to research information about their case, not necessarily lower funnel lawyer lookup. But so you want to be trying to do the best you can strategically to be targeting things that your target audience might be searching for that aren't lower funnel lawyer lookups. That's what I would be looking at strategically.
But that's very practice area specific. There are some things with long purchase cycle, and there are something like the downside with PI there is not a long purchase cycle. You either need it or you don't, right? You're not You're not researching it well ahead of getting T-boned by your neighbor, right?
Well, you might be researching. So again, it's in PI. The search universe you're playing in is not bottom of the funnel lawyer lookup. It's top of the funnel researching stuff about a lawsuit, stuff about your insurance.
But there's
company.
an event. There's a triggering event.
Yes,
right? And you're going to make a decision within 24 hours. I'm sure Near Media's got Near Media does have the answer on this. You're going to make that decision in a short period of time. Other things like, do I get divorced, estate planning, longer purchase cycle? I think it behooves you, maybe even as a priority, to think a lot more about AI when your practice area is less kind of that immediate transactional piece. We just did.
I think the point here is go ahead. Go ahead.
We did a fascinating review recently, last week. Our client who had the highest volume of AI inbounds, AI generated clients, franchise law, right? It's super, super long, in-depth research. That was kind of, it was a data anomaly. And I was like, what's going on here? When we look at all the data, I was like, oh, they do something with a really long purchase cycle. So sorry, the more I think about it, the more, and this isn't about AI, it's about reviews, but like the more your purchase cycle is a long-term one, I think the more AI benefits you. And that's something that I would lean into hard, getting outside of the review game.
And again, I still believe, even with the short purchase cycle, you're not appealing to the legal services consumer who's at the bottom of the funnel, who's like, show me the highest rated car accident lawyer near me. But you are playing in the world of, because again, it's not query based. It's going to be things like, show me lawyers that have the best trial record. Blah. I mean, I make that up. It's a totally different user behavior. And I do think that in those contexts, there's an opportunity to advertise to people that before they get to that bottom of the funnel stage where they're literally just comparing on reviews. And, look, really what we're talking about here is what segment of the audience are you most trying to appeal to? Are you trying to appeal to legal services consumers that are going to shop on reviews? Or are there ways to appeal to legal services consumers in search and in generative experiences outside of that lower funnel lawyer lookup context?
All right. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about Google's PMax and share some data that we've scraped together. So, Gyi, we have taken over a whole bunch of campaigns in 2025 that were built on PMax. Google's PMax.
What is PMax, Conrad?
I was just going to ask you to define what is PMax. PMax is performance max. And it is, there's two answers to your question, Gyi. It is a nuanced answer. The first answer to your question is Google will understand what your objectives are and then use their big brain over at Google to try and maximize the achievement of your objective. The experienced, wily digital marketer's answer to what is PMax is it is a clever way that Google has gotten you to bid on things that you don't really want to bid on, to drive up the prices across the board, making more money for Google, and still have an attempt at driving some business objectives for you. And so we have found, we've kind of for a long time been suspicious that Google may not necessarily have your best interests at heart. And so in 2025, Gyi, we looked at a bunch of PMax campaigns that we took over and actually did a keyword analysis on what people were actually bidding on based on the data that Google actually shared with us. You surprised at the results?
Well, I think there's an important, I thought maybe you were going to give nuance number 2 there, but maybe I missed it. But I think it's important that you're talking specifically about PMax for search ads, which is PMax advertises across a variety of channels beyond just search. And so I think that's important that when we're talking about this so that people understand, because we're like, what you're about to share, I think is not surprising, but is specifically focused on analysis of PMax in the search ad campaign context, correct?
That is correct. And it's those keywords that become really, really fascinating. The low converting keywords that you can spend a lot of budget on. You know, one of the data points that we've cited frequently on this show, Gyi, is the incredible acceleration of the cost for branded queries. And I'm going to get this. We've cited this before. I will cite it again because it is so disgusting, and it explains. This is the explanation of why this has happened. It used to be you could buy your brand queries for about $1. So if someone's looking for Smith and Jones, you can bid for under $1 for that click, and they will convert at about 1 in every 5. So a $5 cost per lead, phone call, form fill, text, or chat. That has changed dramatically. That is now up. Those branded queries are up in the $90 range, and they're converting about 1 in 19. Okay, and the reason for that partly is because of Google's deliberate brand conflation, mixing Smith & Jones Law Firm with divorce lawyer in Cincinnati, which gets more people to bid on Smith & Jones Law Firm unintentionally, but also it shows up in PMax. Okay. And so what we found is that in a PMax run, and this is all of my data comes out of the personal injury world, but about 29% of PMax spend was put on brand, right? Competitor and other brands. So not necessarily even law firms. So you're bidding on things that people aren't really looking for. They're not the bottom of the funnel. They're looking for something else, and you are actually bidding on those brands, which is why these cost per clicks for brand have increased, and why the conversion rate for brand has decreased. It's gross.
Now, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Can you deploy negative keywords to PMax?
Can you deploy negative keywords to PMax? I have no idea because we don't run PMax campaigns.
You can.
There you go.
Can.
Okay.
And so my point about this is that to me, and this is because again, I think we're going to get into the cure for some of these issues. So what I take from your analysis and point is that for many firms, whether they're doing it themselves or they're partnering with an agency, the out of the box PMax campaign is susceptible to huge amounts of waste in terms of bidding on irrelevant keywords, bidding on competitor names, and even worse, in some ways worse than that, because you're basically like, hey, machine, go buy my media on my behalf, and I'm not going to tell you much about what I'm actually looking for. That's to me, the essence is in how the campaigns are being configured, and less about any particular type of campaign in of itself. Because again, so you're like, all right, so we did this analysis. We looked at a bunch of different firms that are running PMax campaigns. There's huge amounts of waste in the search queries. Presumably, these campaigns don't have negative keyword lists in them, unless you're saying, no, they did have negatives and Google was still showing ads on those queries,
I'm assuming they did not have negatives because my read is if you're going to spend the time to take, and if they did have negatives, they were very simplistic, right? So now go ahead.
And just because you've brought this point up before,
yeah,
and listeners will know this. That's not limited to PMax, right? Regular search ads with close variants and all that kind of stuff. Google will show your ad for all sorts of stuff if you don't negative out stuff you don't want.
And so there is a huge importance to me in running sophisticated and large negative keywords lists. And one of the few good things that came out of Google pay-per-click in the last 2 years is the expansion of the negative keyword list pool. I believe it is now at around 10,000, which has been really, really helpful in some ways to mitigate against this. But overall, if you have a sophisticated negative keyword list, and you have the level of expertise to do that, you would not be running PMax. Like those two things, it doesn't make sense that you would do one and then also run PMax. I can't come up with any reason why someone would do that unless they were super, super lazy and not earning their dollars.
Well, I guess the thing that I would say is it depends on strategic approach, because again, you're very focused on search ads. Does it make sense if you're running multi-channel with still all of the positive configuration things that you're talking about in your search ads, but you're still doing demand gen, you're doing it cross-channel, doing that in a PMax campaign. I think there's arguments to be made for that. But I think the big thing for me that you identified in the pre-show and that I think is important for listeners, and one of them is, to your point already, is you still need to manage negatives aggressively. The other thing, though, that PMax really does is because it's AI driven based on the signals that you feed back, is this idea of actually telling the machine that this is what a case looks like for us, and this is what a wanted lead looks like for us. And that's my second question is, of those campaigns that you analyzed, how many of them were actually feeding back client and wanted qualified lead data?
And the answer is none of them. And so what you end up doing, if you have a kind of intermediate level of understanding of how to set up Google Analytics, you can use GA and feedback into the PPC system, the phone call, form fill, text, or chat, which is the lead, right? The reason that's so problematic is that's not an actual new client conversion. Let me use a simplistic, very real example. I know that people who look up my phone number regularly are probably either clients or vendors or opposing counsel. They already know that they want to call me. And so it's very easy. So I'm just now teaching the algorithm to make sure that for these leads, which aren't really leads, that we show that ad over and over and over again, and as aggressively as we possibly can from a bidding perspective, right? And so you're really training a system on something that you don't want it to do. What you really want is to spend a lot of money finding people who are going to turn into clients. And that's not necessarily the same people who are calling you over and over and over and over again because they are already clients. So it is super, super problematic when you are feeding data that seems at face value to be useful. But when you peel back the onion just the slightest bit, or if you apply just a modicum of critical thinking, you will understand how stupid this is.
That's right.
And so, we just bid on a pay-per-click campaign. We charged 20% of the first $10,000. And the client, the prospect was like, listen, someone else is offering me 10% for the first $20,000. And I was like, great, go run PMax by yourself, right? You don't need to, you can't, it's hard. And this is very self-serving. I'm saying you need to spend more money to get a professional to run this stuff because it is so difficult. If you're spending a small percentage of your ad spend on your ad management fee, the only way for people to run an ad like that is through PMax and probably through shitty conversion tracking. And by shitty conversion tracking, I mean feeding back in phone call, form fill, text, or chat, as opposed to the new client data, right? And that's where this becomes really problematic. And it's lazy and it's easy.
And all I would say is a kind of a dovetail here, because I'm in agreement with you. It's not limited to PMax, right? So I'm just looking at, we'll start with PMax, right? So what does Google say? How can I optimize my Performance Max campaign? They have 3 bullets. Here's one of them. Audience signals. Add your customer list or website visitor data to guide the AI. So customer list is exactly what you're talking about. Hey, these objects, these records turned into clients for me. Tell the machine that. Number 2, accurate conversion tracking. Ensure your conversion measurement is set up accurately. And what they really mean there is that you're actually measuring wanted leads and cases versus pixel fires and raw phone calls. And the third thing is they talk about improving creative, which again, that's just good practice regardless of what you're doing. But because PMax is multimedia, it's multi-channel, you can do a lot more damage with a variety of different creative assets. Point being with all of this stuff, though, whether it's PMax or not, PMax is particularly exemplative of this problem because you're turning more over to the machine to go buy, which also brings up another issue that you've raised on this show, which might ultimately be the strongest reason not to use PMax or not to let AI run rampant without signals. If you don't have the data to influence the machine, to teach the machine what to go buy, right? So you're doing a small budget campaign where you don't have a lot of data, you got a huge data scarcity problem. The machine is likely to not perform as well as it would if you were feeding it reams of, this is what we're looking for, these are the wanted leads we're looking for. The more you tell the machine, the better it's going to perform.
So let me just take that one thought and take it a couple steps further. The volume of data that you can feed back in that's going to really start to impact signals for Google, unless you're running a large spend and have large volume, it starts to become statistically very, very difficult to do. Okay. And that's where you don't want to rely on just your data. You want to rely on an agency that has a whole bunch of data that they can take best practices off of, right? And so that's the value of running with a legal specific digital marketing agency. Again, very, very self-serving comment, but there's a reason for that. The other thing when we talk about the volume of data, let's just use very, very simple numbers. Let's say of the leads that you get in that are qualified that you want. So let's call this a qualified lead. Of the leads that you get, let's say you convert 50% of them into clients. What piece of data do you feed back into the Borg? It's not the clients. It is the wanted leads, because you have twice as much data to work with. The fact that you didn't convert that into a client from a bidding perspective, from an algorithm perspective, from an AI perspective is completely immaterial. Okay. You want to find the clients that you actually want. It's just going to be a bigger number mathematically. And so when people talk about feeding clients back in, I'm always like, you're missing 20%, 30%, 50% of the data, because that's so unbelievably important. Let me flip to a different practice area. We've been kind of myopically thinking about personal injury. Let's use employment law. I've talked to 2 employment lawyers recently. One of the problems with employment law is everyone thinks they have a claim. No one does. And so the lead to wanted lead number is typically below 5%. 5% or below. I talked to an employment law firm this week where their number was 3%, right? And that's their cap. Right? Like they want to keep their numbers really low because there's so many Looney Tunes out there who think they have a case. It's really important not to be counting the leads. It's really important to be counting the wanted leads, right? Because you're really trying to help the AI understand and differentiate between all of the stuff that's coming in that's still a consultation, but not a good consultation. So it's the wanted leads that become so unbelievably important.
And I'll throw another idea out to you.
Go.
Your qualification criteria for cases that you'll actually open up might not be identical to what you say is the qualification criteria for a qualified lead that you feed back to the machine.
Tell us why, Gyi.
So it's the same point that you're making, right? So you're like, look, of the total number of even potential valid claims, say our firm is extremely selective, like we're not actually going to open a case. If you say no to all of those, quote unquote, they meet criteria set A, and you're like, these are actually good potential cases, but we're not a high volume law firm. We're being very selective with our choices. You might recognize that, like, hey, even though we're not going to open up a case on this one, we're going to send back to the machine that you're in the right ballpark, you're looking in the right spot. Like this is there are all sorts of reasons why this is a good qualified lead. It just so happens that our firm isn't going to open a case on this one. It might not be a 1-for-1 is what I would say.
And if you are playing the LSA game, not the pay-per-click game,
right.
That is part, and they tell you this, that is part of the game. So training your intake in real time to be able to differentiate between those two things, that is the part of the nuance of running LSAs extremely well and maybe at break even.
And that's where I was going to go next, where it's not just the technical implementation. It's not just the data infrastructure. It's not just the technical implementation. It's the training of intake to be like, hey, when from these sources, this is criteria set. This is the box you're going to check in the CRM to feed back to the machine. even if we ultimately conclude that this isn't a lead that we're going to, the case that we're going to take on, it's still going to be a turn down. Don't limit, and this is across a variety of contexts, don't limit communicating with the machine only, and you already made this point, not just to cases that you would take, but even cases that you're like, this is a good case, we ultimately just decide not to open it up. And with that, we are unfortunately out of time. Thank you so much, specifically to Al Ludwig for listening and to the rest of you for listening. As always, if you just stumbled across this and you're super curious about it, please do subscribe. We love hearing from you. If you have topic suggestions, questions, or additional feedback, we want to hear it. Reach out to us at all the variety of channels that you can. Until next time, Conrad and Gyi saying farewell from Lunch Hour Legal Marketing.
Money makes a world go round. Money makes a world go round. Yeah, money make a world go round. Yeah, money make a world go round.